Welcome back to another episode of Life with Lamb. Today I'm here with Lucy Skelton, a young and fresh face in the world of activism and politics. She's the founder of the Student Voice Network and a passionate advocate for youth engagement in politics. Lucy is currently studying at ANU in public policy and international relations, and she has kindly joined us on the podcast today to talk about her life and her journey to politics. So welcome, Lucy.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm really excited, and I think some important piece of information and context is that we used to do karate together.
We did.
Like, how amazing is that? Like,
small world.
It is. It's an extremely small world, and yeah, I just don't remember. We weren't like buddies ever in the class, but I always remember you running these little initiatives, like I guess like we're addressed to class day and everything.
Oh, it was so, because I think you're right, we weren't like really close, but I definitely remember seeing you there and thinking like you were a few belts above me and going like, oh, I could be like that, which is so funny now reconnecting. Yeah,
definitely. Oh, glad to hear that I was inspiring you to push yourself. Shout out to Beginner to Black Belt.
Absolutely, they're so good.
Yeah, brilliant club, and Chris Diamond, what an awesome individual.
I'm so glad that we like had him as a teacher. Like, he was fantastic.
Definitely. So it's just crazy that we crossed paths. And then I think I saw your campaign pop up in 2022 when you decided to run for the member for Kew.
Yep.
Amazing, getting my facts right. And I was like, oh my God, I know this girl. I know this girl. So I chucked you a follow and slid into your DMs.
Yeah.
And we've sort of been back and forth, but you're visiting Melbourne this week due to your mid-sem break, and I'm so keen to have you on and just to talk about your political journey and just like where you've come from to where you are now.
Yeah, happy to.
I'm so excited. And I guess, can you talk to us a bit about what you were like growing up?
Yeah, sure. I was talking to my mum about coming onto this podcast, and I was speaking to her about it, and she's like, from a very young age, when I was really small, I always had a sense of justice, and that I never wanted to accept that things were just going to be the way they were. I always wanted them to be better, and I wanted to be able to help people and help the planet. So my family is not political at all. Like, we've got a joke in my family that they do not know where I've come from. They've got no idea, except that now I'm here and I absolutely love it. So always trying to make a difference, always wanting to be involved in the community, and always willing to put my hand up to help.
Yeah, I love that. And you can definitely see that with, the little initiatives that you held in class and like karate as well. Yeah, please talk to us a bit about it. I know you definitely wanted to mention it and bring light to it.
Yeah. No, it's I think we were just saying before the pod that it's one of those examples that I don't usually come to, but it's something that was really important to me and really pivotal to the activist I became and the campaigner I became. So I was a One Girl ambassador. So if you haven't heard of One Girl before, it's an organisation that supports girls' education in Sierra Leone and Uganda, Africa. And there was statistics there, like especially when I was more involved. So I'm assuming it's probably similar still, unfortunately. But where girls is at my age at the time, like 13, 14, like are more likely to be sexually assaulted than they are to go to high school. So it's all about creating scholarships and fundraising to get these girls into schools. And there's this big charity, there's a big fundraiser, that they do every year. We're called Do It in a Dress. So you pick an activity that you normally wouldn't do in a dress. Like, for instance, people would like go on a school dress as well. Like would go like on a hike in a school dress, or go surfing in a school dress, or like go ice skating in a school dress. And at the time I really wanted to find a way that I could be involved and I could help fundraise for this cause. And what was I doing? I was at karate. So I organised with our fantastic karate club to have the adults class that we were both in turn up in a school dress and help fundraise. So we have I've got these photos of our class in a, doing kumite, fighting in school dresses, and which was lots of fun. So I'm pretty sure we raised quite a bit for the organisation, but it was definitely one of my first proper experiences in fundraising, and doing it quite consistently as well. Definitely.
And I know you sort of spoke on the idea that you have always been this kid that sort of saw a better way or a way to improve other people's lives as well. So it's amazing that you sort of gravitated towards those incentives and initiatives. I wanted to ask as well, we're in this sort of day and age where there's this paradox where we know that the world is sort of slowly depreciating. Things are getting a little bit worse. Climate change is worse than ever.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of bickering going on in politics, or at least like as we get older, we sort of start to see a bit more of that. But as young people, like yourself and I, we're both 21. How do you sort of get involved with it? I think there's this, the paradox of not being able to navigate actually doing something about it, but knowing that it's an apparent issue.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those things when it's really easy to feel as if you're a very small fish in a big pond. Like, you know that there's climate change, you know there's social justice issues, you know that there are things going wrong, but thinking, what can I do? How can I help? How can I make an impact? Will it even matter if I even try? But I think that the thing that I really want to emphasize is that you absolutely will. It will matter if you put your hand up and you give it a go, and you don't have to do everything. I really love that quote that's like, everyone doesn't have to do everything, but everyone has to do something. So it's just about 100%. What kind of difference can you make in your life? So for instance, going back to the example we had before about karate, I don't know how to surf. I wasn't going to try and surf in a dress. Maybe that's next year's fundraiser. But my karate class, that's how I could make a difference. Or if you have art skills, how can you use your art? If you love public speaking, isn't many, but like if that's what you love doing, use that as well. So no matter the things that you're already interested in, how can you incorporate that? And then the other lesson that I would try and share is that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Chances are there are other people who care, there are other people who you could team up with, and organisations already trying to do something. So Google, social media, do a bit of research on what you care about, find the organisations and try and get involved that way.
Yeah, I love that. And we're already getting into tangible ways that you can sort of start action, which is brilliant. And thank you for the words of wisdom. I wanted to date back to sort of your primary school, high school days, you know, your formative years where you would have carried this persona of wanting to fix the world, help the world. But I can imagine, you know, school's sometimes not the best place for that. And you can get undermined a little bit. And kids are like, well, why are you so interested in doing this? Like, it's not possible. It's not feasible. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? Like, what were the criticisms that you sort of faced during those formative years?
Well, I think...
if any.
Well, that's the really lucky thing, I think. I hear so often about, you know, families unsupportive. And I certainly had, like, to an extent that. But I ran my first fundraiser in year 4.
Wow. That's incredible.
And I look back and I go, they let me do that? Like, really? Like, this 10-year-old walked in and was like, pretty please, like, and they were like, sure. No, so I ran my first fundraiser for the Starlight Foundation in year 4 at my primary school. So the key thing with that was, so my brother, when he was born, so my brother and I are really close. He's around 2 years younger than me.
Good age gap, that one.
Really good age gap.
Really good
but
age
now
gap.
He's a head taller than me, and it's not okay.
Same with my brother, which is pretty disrespectful. He's
honestly
younger than
disrespect.
Me. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, exactly. No, but so he, when he was born, he had to have, to put it simply, like, skull reshaping surgery, like, so pretty serious kind of things, and it's kind of affected him and things. But one of the organizations that really helped him was the Starlight Foundation. So in year 4, with my sense of justice, I really wanted to do something to help, and I decided that we should do a fundraiser for the Starlight Foundation. So we had a pajama day for all the sick kids in hospital that couldn't be there, so everyone turned up in pajamas, and we organized, like, to go get, like, pieces of merch and, like, pens and, like, things we could sell for them. And I went around to all the classrooms and got coin donation and everything like that. So, but again, it's one of those funny things thinking back where they let me do that. But the thing I would say about, like, more challenges in the primary school kind of thing is, although people were supportive, I think there's this broad sense of, how do we actually do something? And people didn't necessarily know. So a key example I come to is in year 6, I decided to start a petition.
Wow. How old are we in year 6? We're like 12.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So I didn't not like puppy farms, still don't, but did not like puppy farms. And I thought, what can I do? And I knew that something that usually possibly worked, like I'd heard of a petition, and I thought, okay, let's do this. So I went to my principal and I was like, hello, probably not exactly like this, but like, hello, can I please print out petitions and put them up all over the school, and like we can collect signatures? And again, they were like, sure. So I printed out and I got like preps, year 6, like all these school students, teachers to go and sign this puppy farm petition. And I remember like thinking this is really successful and like we have so many signatures, like this is so good. But I look back now and I think like nothing happened. Nothing. I had no idea what to do with the petition. Like I was a 12 years old who obviously had a lot of enthusiasm and I wanted to do something to help, but I had no idea. So I think I just had a bunch of paper that stayed with me for like for a while. Like, but I didn't know that you were meant to table it in Parliament. I didn't know you had to get like parliamentary support. I didn't know there was legislation. I didn't know there were already campaigns happening. I didn't know all of this. And the people around me didn't know all of this, and they didn't know how to tell me, but they just thought, that's probably pretty cute. She obviously cares about puppies. Oh my gosh. But so it's also about not necessarily people stopping me, but not knowing the next step. So having people who are involved in campaigning spaces and people who know how to make a difference, whether it's in political or social movements and things like that, being able to find that right support.
100%. And you can probably relate that back to like a business as well. Like you can have the enthusiasm and the support of all your people, but is it actually feasible?
No,
like, can you actually implement those sorts of initiatives or programs that you're wanting to implement? So,
absolutely. That's
there's so much, I guess, like paperwork or behind the scenes that needs to be done as well. But I think it's like ask and you shall receive in high school or primary school.
Yeah.
Of course, people and adults are going to want to see children and kids like step up and really advocate for something that they're passionate about. And I think that's a great message, you know, like you should be confident or feel confident enough to reach out to people to support your cause and to support your why as well. I love that. I love that resonance so much. And I guess like you sort of see these themes of yourself, you know, starting a petition, doing a fundraising and those sorts of things. When it sort of got to high school and everything, were you focused on that aspect of yourself, like being altruistic? Did career conversations start to pop up at all? And what were they like? Yeah.
So the big thing for me growing up was that I wanted to be a vet. So up until I was about 15, 16, there was always like, I'll be a vet part-time author, I'll be a vet part-time something else. But like the main strong and true was I wanted to be a vet, and I wanted to be an endangered species vet. So I wanted to look at species extinction, and I wanted to work with big animals, essentially. So I wanted to travel the world fighting species extinction. But it kind of meant that I was on this career path. But as soon as I got involved, not as soon as, but as I started to get more involved in environmental and social justice spaces and realising, you know, about forest degradation and land clearing and poaching and so many other issues that are facing wildlife, I realised by about 15 that by the time I was able to finish high school, went to university, got the degree and experience I would need to help the species I was ready and willing to dedicate my life to, if the wrong decisions were made by politicians this decade, most of them weren't going to be there by the time I was able to help them. So it really emphasised for me that even if that was what, like if my goal wasn't I want to be a vet, if my goal was I want to help, if my goal was I want to help these species, the most effective thing I could do, for me at least, didn't feel like becoming a vet anymore. It felt like going into politics.
I love that. So from what it sounds like from a micro level, it's like, yes, I can be a vet and help these endangered species, but then it's like realizing your higher self, and on a macro level, it's like, why don't I just step in and solve the root cause of it, like from the top sort of thing. Is that what was running through your head?
It definitely is. Something that often runs through my head is this example of you run into your kitchen and the taps flooded the kitchen. Have you heard of this?
No, I haven't. No. Go ahead.
So you run into your kitchen and there's like the tap is on and it's flooded your kitchen. Do you start mopping up the water? Or do you turn off the tap?
Oh, beautiful.
So it's something I often think about, because like you don't want to turn off the tap and then leave the kitchen, like, because you have to mop up the water too. Like otherwise things are going to get moldy and you've got to you've got to address that part as well. But you can't just like go into the kitchen and start mopping up the water and being like, oh, why is it still wet? Like
oh no,
oh no, I don't understand. Like, you have to turn off the tap too, which is something that I think about a lot when it comes to my activism and my advocacy and why I do what I do. Because for me, I want to look at the big picture and how can you make the biggest impact possible as fast as possible.
I love that. Oh, I love that analogy so much. Yeah, it's so true, because I think people look so closely to the issue, and sometimes you just aren't able to zoom out and realize what the actual problem is from afar. So that's a beautiful analogy, and I guess commend anyone to or recommend anyone to take that into their lives. Like, maybe there's one problem leaking into your life that you can't quite find the issue for, but once you sort of take that step out and allow it to sort of fizzle, then you're able to sort of see it.
No, absolutely.
It brings me back to this quote. It's like, the things that you stare at for too long start to become invisible.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah, I love that. Shout out Anthony. He definitely he said that, and wow, like, how true it rings so true for like so many things, whether that's like relationships or like these problems that happen. Like, sometimes you just aren't able to see it. It's like when you funny thing that just popped up, it's like when you spell a word and you look at that word for a very long time, and then that word starts to look like it's spelt wrong. It happens all the time.
It absolutely does. Whenever I have to write an essay for like university, I'm always like, is that how you spell?
Is that how you spell? Literally. Oh my gosh. Talk to us about the sort of key pivotal moment where you realised, hey, maybe being a vet probably isn't going to solve the root cause, but being a politician is. Yeah,
that's such a great question. So for me now, I've worked for politicians, I've worked in not-for-profits, I've run as a candidate, and I obviously love it. Like, I absolutely love it. There's pros and cons, but I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. But going back to that pivotal moment, which is why it's such a great question, I remember lying in bed late one night and I was like looking up at my roof, and I thought to myself, and I was realising the things we were just talking about, being like, if I really want to make this kind of impact, is this going to be the place? And I thought to myself, oh, am I going to have to go into politics? Like, oh no, I cannot think of anything worse. Because at the time, like, direct political engagement, I just I was just like, it's basically just pale, stale men. It's basically just a bunch of old white guys, was essentially like my, at the time, impression of what politics looked like.
But for the most part, it sort of did.
Yeah, it absolutely did. Yeah. And also, like, when you often, the general public's engagement with politics, you're not meeting, you're not necessarily like having a broad sense of like, oh, we can get engaged like this, or these are the local branch members of political parties and trade union movement, and like, you don't get to meet all of this. Often you just see the best and the worst. And when you look at Parliament, often I've heard that when people look, it looks like, to put it bluntly, like a bunch of kindergartners. Because like, and some people don't find that political environment appealing, of course. Why would they? So like, that was what I was looking out at, and I thought to myself, like, oh, I can't think of anything worse than wanting to try and get involved in that. But of course, I think the journey of going from that point there, where I like couldn't think of anything worse, to now obviously adoring it, and of course with its challenges and with its cons, but wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
So what appealed to you, and what was that first step like? So you've realised, oh gosh, I have to step into politics. Where did you sort of branch out to get into politics? I don't think it's a topic that's sort of spoken about that much. Like,
no, it's not.
The confusion and the clarity, or the lack of clarity surrounding politics, and like, how do you actually get into it? Like, do you go to your local? Exactly. Do you go to your local council? Do you have to go to Canberra? Like, what was the process like? Yeah,
like, to give you also like an embarrassing example. Like, I think like year 10 even, so like 16, like something for me that like I look back and I was a bit embarrassed by. Like, I remember asking my dad and being like, how does it all work? Like, I didn't feel like I'd gotten in like political literacy on how the systems work and who's who and who does what and how do you get anywhere. I felt like I had no idea. So like, I was just like, how does this work? What are the levels of government? I was still confused. So I really understand the question. I think it's a question on a lot of people's minds. I think the simplest thing to do is to look at the candidates, perhaps, like, is probably a good start. Like, but it depends on how you want to get involved, because it's, I think, a difference between I want to be an educated voter and I want to, like, make a decision on polling day, and also saying I want to get involved perhaps in a political party, or I want to get involved, in more advocacy movements that are trying to advocate for different political decisions. So, like, I think there's a really broad system, but I think my first recommendation would be to look at the kind of different political movements. So, like, political parties. So, for instance, is there a political party that you align with? Look at what they're doing, if that aligns to what you want to do. They're also their theory of change. This also could be the independence movement as well. Like, it just, whatever aligns to what you see. And I would also, again, make that point not so well put, but the theory of change, I think, really matters. So it's not just about the policies, but for me, it's about who has the power to actually do something. And if I join that political party, how much say will I have in that? So when I got to university, this was my real first chance to get involved, like, to be in the Labor Party. So I got to meet people who had really similar vision and passion to me. They were really progressive. They wanted to get things done. And by having a foot in the door, like, the opportunities were endless. So to give you an example, I had spent years. So again, I've just told you about how my first fundraiser was when I was 10 years old. So I've kind of been in and out of these spaces to differing levels for a very long time. But I'd been trying to knock on doors, and I was calling for different forms of change and different policy change. And I never really felt like it was going anywhere. It felt like it took forever to do everything. No one was listening. And I just felt like I was shouting at a room with a closed door. However, when I got involved with my Labor Party group on campus up at ANU, the first event they had, and the fun of Canberra, but also happens at universities across the country, was that the first event they had was held in Parliament House. So, number one, I was being brought into Parliament House, and then they set up like a nibbles kind of, like, here's some food, and then come meet members of Parliament. So I was taken to Parliament House behind the scenes, and then meeting members of Parliament, like, they were just coming in and being like, hey, how you going? Like, what are you interested in? Like, tell me more. Like, where do you want to go? Like, and these were people, like, I won't necessarily say who, but, like, these were people that I've been trying to contact for years. And suddenly, with, like, no specific effort, here they were, and I could talk to them, which was just, like, amazing.
Yeah.
And then, like, I often feel as if you're not, like, for me, being part of a political party, if the process of being able to get a vote, like, so just to give you another bit of context, tell me if I'm just going on a ramble here.
Whole point of a podcast. I'll jump in a bit.
Yeah, do. But for instance, the major parties at least, and I think to an extent as well, but, like, for major parties at least, who gets to be the candidate is decided by what's called, like, a branch member of that party. So each of the branch members get a vote. And then they decide, like, so people can put their hand up and say, I want to run. And then the branch votes. And they say, we want this person or we want this person. So who is in that branch. And if you say, I want to be part of this political, you then get a say in who your candidate is, which is cool. And then there's also things called, like party platform and party documents, which then outline the ambition. So if this party gets elected into government, this is what they'll do. So you then get, like, you can get a say on who goes to that conference to represent your views and values in that document. So I just, like, if you want to have a say, instead of just yelling at the room, you get a chance to be in the room. And for me, that was just the best thing.
Yeah, beautiful. So many themes there, particularly surrounding, like, political literacy. I will sit here and say that I'm very politically illiterate. And I think a lot of us are.
As well, I don't think it's taught.
It's not taught in school to the extent that it should be. And I think as the future generation coming through, like, now it is more important than ever to be literate in this scene.
Yeah.
Like, we are the next generation coming through. We get
Absolutely.
a say in voting. Like, yes, these people sitting in parliament you might not agree with, you might agree
Yeah.
with, but you have a say in that.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that is so important. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm sure we'll touch on like resources that you can go to
Yeah, absolutely.
educate yourself and everything later on in the podcast, but that's such an important theme out of that. And even the idea of networking and putting yourself out there as well. It's like, yes, like we can complain all we want to thin air or a brick wall or an empty room with the door closed, but why not like go to the root cause of it? Again,
Yeah.
like the turning off the tap. So
Yeah.
involving yourself in student committees, very amazing opportunity that universities provide. Like, I'm
Yeah.
realizing the importance of joining a club. And
Yeah.
so say for my instance, like I'm part of a management and marketing club.
Yeah, great.
And the events that we hold, you get to meet industry professionals
Yeah.
from all these companies, which sets you up for the future, graduate opportunities. You get to meet brilliant people, like-minded people even. And that sets you up. So
Yeah,
whether it's a
absolutely.
job perspective thing or finding an issue that you're passionate about and asking like, why aren't we doing
Yeah.
anything about this? Like,
Yeah.
so important. So I love that entire tangent about it and how sort of literate you became with it. But has it always been like that? Like, where did you sort of start when you entered your political journey?
Yeah, like so just to clarify, do you mean
Sort of like educating yourself. So, you know,
Yeah.
you've had this
how does it
epiphany.
work? Yeah.
You've had the epiphany and you're like, okay, I need to get my foot in the door.
Oh, yeah. I
So
know.
was university the first step?
I think for me, I went round quite a windy road to get there, and there were points where you think you know it and then you don't, and then like you like the people you know and you get told more, and a lot of this I wish was common knowledge, but it's taken me up until now to fully understand it, and there's still so much I don't even know.
I think it's so convoluted as well.
It's
So
so
that's
convoluted.
probably what sets people off it and deters them from actually diving into the intricacies of politics and what it is.
Like, it can be, I think I'm trying to put it in a way because I know it can be simple. I really want to be able to, you know, summarize everything that I've
Jeez, we need like a 3-hour pod or
I think we
something.
might, like, no, but I really want like a nice Canva. Go.
100%.
No, but I think, would it be my recommendation, or like how did I get started? Like, is that...
Yeah, how did you get started?
Yeah, I think finding people. Like, I think it really comes back to finding a tribe, finding people who are passionate and like-minded like you are, and you can learn together. I think that's always the first step. No matter what you care about, find someone else. Find a group of people who are already doing it, and then go together. So in politics, there could be a specific issue. Like, if you're really passionate about you know, one issue, find that group of people. If you're really passionate about a whole system of ideas, get with them. If you're passionate about whatever it is, find your people.
Amazing. I wanted to ask as well, I guess there's this fear of overstepping or saying the wrong thing in politics, or I guess the phrase is being like politically correct.
Yeah.
How did you navigate that? And has that ever come across in your day-to-day life?
Yeah, for sure. And I think as someone who I do identify as like very progressive, like as is, so it's something that I often hear as one of like the criticisms. But I think one of the things for me is just always trying to have respect at the base of it. You know, looking after communities, especially more vulnerable communities, and being respectful of boundaries and respectful language, I think is really important. So I think I think there are people who are really worried. Like, they've got really good hearts. They want to know. They want to know, but they're scared to ask because they're worried that somebody's going to label them as like, as all the different types of phobic.
Yes, everything.
However, I think it's really important to ask. I think it's also important to reflect on who you're asking and not necessarily putting like an emotional load on them for having to explain like all the reasons why, like, you know, women are more marginalized, or racism, or like, you know, transphobia. Like, you like not necessarily having to go to that group, but like you can do lots of research online to try and educate yourself. And I think one of the biggest lessons is just, if you do muck up, everyone's going to muck up. Just accepting it. Like, everybody is going to muck up. Like, but that's okay. Just say sorry, apologize, move on quickly.
Definitely.
You know.
And speaking from, I guess, like my Asian background as well, sometimes I could get really upset if someone say like racist towards me, but then I have to understand that I guess these questions are, and it goes down to like reading the heart and like where the intention's at as well.
Absolutely.
You have to know that some people are like trying to better themselves, and sometimes the phrasing might not be right.
Yeah, for sure.
But you have to know the intentions there, and it's like my duty as well as an Asian Australian to sort of educate as well. Obviously not all the time, because
I think that's such a great point.
You should be doing your own research and I guess speaking from a place where you are sort of well knowledged. But it's an interesting conversation, that one, because where's the balance and where's the fine line that you sort of draw between the two parties?
Absolutely. And I think you made such a great point there around intention, because if somebody's coming up to you and they're intentionally trying to hurt you, intentionally trying to cause harm, that's a very different situation to someone who I think just hasn't had the opportunity to learn before or become educated. Like a few of my really close mates, like I feel very lucky, very privileged that I've been able to grow up in the way that I have, and also been able to be educated on a lot of these issues with my friends and community. I know that other people haven't had that chance. So if their intentions are in the right place, really always giving them the time.
100%. With that idea of respect as well, you are the youngest candidate in the Parliament House, I believe.
Yeah. So the way that I describe, so I was one of the youngest candidates in the Victorian election, and then so I ran when I was 20 years old.
Incredible.
So, which is not very common to say the least, but it means that if I had been elected at 20 years old, I would have been the youngest woman ever elected to any Australian parliament, which I think is really special.
I think so too.
But yeah.
And I'd love to discuss that a bit further. I guess this idea of respect and everything, you are the youngest candidate as well. I wanted to ask about, I guess, the idea of being talked down to.
Yeah. My goodness.
I know Parliament is a very prestigious location, and there are a lot of established individuals there who are in that older demographic. Can you talk to us about any instances where you had been talked down to purely based off age and, I guess, inexperience, quote unquote?
I've been told, like, one of the key things, like, I'll give you an example when I was a candidate, but before I do that, like, when I volunteered in my first election back in 2018, I made it a point of really, like, with genuine intent, like, just talking to every other party group individual, like, just to be like, hi, nice to meet you, what brings you here? Like, it's so, like, if someone cares enough to put their hand up and give up their time to come out on polling day, like, I'd like to understand where that is and why that's happened. So, genuine curiosity. And I was talking to someone and they said, like, oh, you're with them now, but when you get older and when you have kids, like, everything will change. Like, you just won't be you anymore. Like, and I think it's an attitude that is more widely reflected than you think. Like, and I understand, I don't think I'm a finished product at all. I want to learn more. I have so much more to learn, and I absolutely recognize that. But there's also this ongoing attitude that when you're young, your opinions don't matter yet, that your reflections don't matter yet. You have to wait. And I think that's wrong. The other thing was when I was a candidate in the election, so although I've been involved in politics very directly, like for a few years now, I've worked in politics, I've worked in campaigns, I've done all of this. I had people who are, just because they were older, like, and also on the other side of politics, which was always a bit strange. Like, it wasn't even people, like, of course there was to a extent in my own political party, but in other political parties who were like, oh, it's cool that this young woman's running. Love that. Thank you very much. But they would give me advice as kind of like pity advice, like to be like, here you go, here's how you do this. And I was like, I'm your opposition. And you decided to do this a few months ago. Like, why are you assuming that, you know, I've just like on a whim, like when I chose to like, so I grew up in Kew. So that's my home, my community, my family. I grew up in Kew. However, like, I think people just assumed that because I was 20 and like I'm a young, like, I think it also has an aspect of being a young woman. I'd just like gotten up one day and chosen to do it. Like, I'd just like been like, cool, this seems fun. I'll just like on a whim run for Victorian State Parliament. However, when I ran, so I'd moved up to Canberra for university, and so when I came back to run, like I had to give up like my scholarship. I like to like afford to live and rent and do things. Like I had to give up my scholarship. I like moved interstate. I like organized campaigns. I organized volunteers, fundraising. Like I organized like, so I drastically changed my life to come and do this, and I'm so grateful that I did. But just to think that it like happened on a whim, you know, that it's just one of those assumptions.
Yeah, like completely neglecting the fact that your why is what's driving you, and it's like, oh, you know, like, oh, it's cute that you're a little young person trying to establish yourself in this world. Like, oh, we're the big people that have done it all and everything, but yeah, it's cute that you're trying to get involved.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, that's the sort of attitude that I'm getting anyway. It's funny, this like idea of, oh, you're too young to experience it, and it's like, oh, you need to hit a certain like age where you can start to experience things, but we are all on different walks of life and different journeys and pathways, and just like interesting adventures, you know, like we are both 21 but both doing completely different things.
Absolutely.
And you saw like there's no age limit or threshold where suddenly, oh, amazing, like you are this amazing adult that's learnt it all. Things like driving licenses, maybe that's probably the only distinguishing point where you can get in the car by yourself and start driving and everything. Those are the ones or like alcohol where you can start drinking of legal age. Like those are the ones where it's like, okay, maybe like I've ticked off the box, I've reached that threshold. But in terms of like emotional development, your why, your purpose and those things, you can never say, oh, you have to hit 30. That's when, you know, you'll be established and have kids, and that's like when you're going to find your purpose, you know? Like you're going to be lost for these 20 odd years. But when you hit 30, that's when you're going to find it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like there are people who are still trying to find their why in 30s, and that's completely
later
fine.
As well. And
later.
That's okay too.
Exactly. People are pivoting from roles and jobs, and it's so apparent and common now that you can't really put a number on these sorts of things. Like everyone is on their own journey.
Oh, I could not agree with you more. And the other three, like there's 3 points that I always raise when it's like, why would you elect a young person? And so people will often say, like, or not necessarily say to my face, but I would definitely hear it and think, like, you know, oh, who would want to elect a 20-year-old? Like, they don't have enough experience. So the point around experience is one that comes up really often. However, the point that I would raise is that there is currently no one in Parliament, at least in Victoria, like under the age of 30. That's an entire demographic of people that currently has no representation in terms of like someone who actually is part of that group in Parliament. So the lived experience, like I may not have 20 years of corporate experience, but I have 20 years of experience of growing up in an age with social media, being in high school, like in the pandemic, what it's like to essentially just go to university at this time and age. Like those are lived experiences that no one else can bring simply because they're not part of that group. So I think representation and diversity is so important in Parliament. Like we need people to look up to. You know, you can't be what you can't see. And I think we need to think about when we say things like that, we also need to include young people as part of that.
Beautiful. Beautifully put. I love that so much. And I guess I love the idea of you talk about we've lived these experiences, we've experienced them, and I did another podcast with Anthony, brilliant storyteller and does storytelling coaching, but his idea of I guess the lens that he takes on imposter syndrome is incredible, because imposter syndrome, I'm sure you've experienced it and we can definitely talk about it a bit, but it's like, who is someone else to say that your experience doesn't matter?
Yeah, absolutely.
You have lived through the pandemic. No one else has. Through high school. You have, I don't know, grown up with digital media, social media, everything happening around, where these people who are older have not. And 30 years is a huge age gap to be missing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yes, I understand, like, you might need more worldly experience, etc., etc., etc. But you can't neglect these experiences that people are going through.
I couldn't agree more. And the other thing I would add is I think we're thinking about when we elect people to Parliament, we think about electing that one person. But I think the important thing to remember is that we're electing people, especially if you're electing to a political party, you're electing people as part of a team. You're electing people to sit in a room that can bring their experience and their consideration to part of a team. So we all, like for instance, in the federal election, federal electorates have about 100,000 people-ish. So you're electing one person to represent 100,000-ish people. That one person is not going to have every single demographic of 100,000 people. But you want to elect, when you think more overarchingly, we want to elect doctors, we want to elect engineers, we want to elect lawyers, we want to elect carpenters, like we want to elect a really wide array of people. So that way our parliament and who makes our decisions is more reflective of our communities. So when you elect someone, it's not just about that one person. I think it's good to think about that person and what are they going to say, what are they going to bring. But I think it's more important to think about what can they contribute to that team.
Definitely. I think you encapsulated diversity to a T there, and how important it is in a team as well, because you're going to have your preconceived biases and prejudice as well, like just hardwired into you. So if that is the only group and they're the only groups that are in this one big parliament, then what change is going to be made? Absolutely. Like look at like I really love the quote, "No decisions about us without us." You need the people in the room who are going to have to face the consequences of that decision. They're in the room. You can't, like, I think a really key example is you can't have you wouldn't want only a group of men deciding on the reproductive rights of women. Absolutely not.
You don't want a room of white people discussing the racial discrimination. Like, you need people in those rooms who are facing the consequences of those decisions. And if you don't have them there, you're going to make poor decisions, which is why I think also the voice is so important coming up with the referendum this year as well, because simply that's like an advisory body to provide advice on the decisions that face them. No decisions about us without us.
Beautiful. I had a question from Plastic Free Sophia, shout out. She asked, what did you respond with when people push you down for your age? And I wanted to add to that, what are some of the ways that you learn to navigate being talked down to?
Yeah, great question. So I think the first one was, one we just discussed. So I would talk to them about experience, because that would be, I think, the first thing that would come up. And I would say, the experiences, one, you don't know me you necessarily yet, like you don't know my experiences, like I have experience, as an activist for over a decade. I have experience as a young person. I've traveled across the country and internationally speaking and writing on climate change and social justice issues. This is something I feel very confident in and I'm happy to take a lead in. So I have experience here, maybe not 20 years corporate experience, but I definitely have experience and lived experience that no one else could provide here for you. The second thing that I would respond with is, again, thinking about what the characteristics are of who makes a good representative. So there's three things that I think make a good local representative, and it isn't necessarily being a lawyer or being a doctor or being anything else. I think you have to be a really good listener. I think you need to be able to listen to the community, hear what they have to say, and be really, really respectful when you do that, but I think you need to be able to listen. The second thing you need to be able to do is advocate. You need to be able to take what you've heard and be able to push it in Parliament and push it in policy. And the third thing that you need is that you need to be able to communicate that back to the community. This is what I've done for you. This is how I can help. This is what we're doing. And those are the skills, just to put it really simply, I think you need as a politician. And I don't think that the only way to obtain those skills is when I think you wake up one day and you've turned 40 or 50 or 60. Like, I think those are skills that can be built and learnt on earlier. And these are things that I know that I've been working really hard on to build up over years. Talk
to us about the process of building up these skills. So you've spoken at Parliament, which is one of the most accredited and prestigious locations in Australia, in front of all these people who are potentially judging you as well. Like, who's this 20-year-old that's like jumped on stage and started talking? Like, what's that all like? What are the skills you need, and how did you go about building them? Yeah, I think going back to being also talked down to, I think building up a thick skin is definitely something that's part of that experience.
something that I like to think about with politics is I understand that I need thick skin to a certain extent. Like, I don't want every comment that's negative or every DM I get that isn't very flattering to break me. Like, I want to be able to push through it and listen. But I also don't want that skin to be so thick that I can't feel or connect anymore with my community in a really honest, genuine and authentic way. Like, I want to be able to be vulnerable. I want to be able to be emotional. I want to be really real. But I also want to be able to be strong enough within myself that if I hear something, if it's constructive, if it's something that I've done, something I can learn from, thank you. Like, it's an uncomfortable situation to be in, but thank you, like, for telling me. But if it's someone that's coming from a place of just genuine, like, they're not going to move, they're not going to budge, understanding that and moving on. The other, like, key example I could give. So when you're knocking on doors to the election, so it takes anything you do in a campaign context, you've only got a certain amount of time. You've got so many people to talk to. So for instance, in our campaign, we knocked on over 15,000 doors.
Wow.
Which is huge. But we've got a very big electorate, so that wasn't even everyone. So when you're knocking on doors, one of the things that I did myself and we tell our volunteers to do, and I think this is you can apply this to so many things. If someone knocks on the door and they say, like, bugger off, slam the door, thank you, have a nice day, you leave. Like, you don't need to spend any time on them. They're not going to move, they're not going to budge. You could stand there for half an hour, like, debating whatever it is they are, but they're not going to move. You've only got so much time. This isn't where you should spend it. And then on the same hand, if you open the door and they go, oh my God, it's you, it's so great to see you, thank you, like, so on and so forth, you say, thank you so much, I really appreciate your support, and you move to the next house, because the people that you want to spend the most time on in a campaign context is the people who are undecided and the people who are in the middle. You want to talk to the people who are curious but they're not sure yet. Like, those are the people you want to spend your time on. You can't spend your time, it's not a wise decision to spend your time on either of the other ends. So understanding who those people are on the negative side and understanding they're not worth your time is so important.
I think that's beautiful. That's a beautiful rhetoric for life, like the people that you surround yourself with. You don't want to surround yourself with people that are going to be like yes men to you and like, yes, that's awesome, that's an amazing decision, yes and then you make these foolish decisions because of it, because no one's in your corner to be honest with you and have those real conversations and be like, why are you doing this? Like, or what's the rationale behind it? But then you don't want to surround yourself with people who are going to belittle you after every decision that you make. So say you want to start your own podcast and they're like, oh, that's a stupid idea, like, don't do that at all. Like, that hurts. Like, it does. And you don't want to surround yourself with people that are like that. But when people flip the lens and they're sort of in the middle and they're like, oh, that's amazing, like, but why do you want to start a podcast? Like, what's the reasoning behind it? And they're inquisitive about it and they're questioning the reason or rationale behind it. Those are the people that you want to surround yourself with in life, in business, in relationships and everything. So I love that sense so much. I wanted to ask, what was sort of the worst comment or DM or message or experience that you've received but turned out to be a huge lesson for yourself?
Oh,
if you can think of one. It's like easy to pick out the really difficult messages, because I'm sure there's a lot of commentary around that and people are very opinionated, but was there one where you were like, wow, that really hurt but taught me a really valuable lesson?
There's two things that are coming to mind. So maybe if I share those two things and then we'll see what sticks. So the first thing that comes to mind was, like, the things that were really, really horrible, I know this might sound strange, didn't really affect me. And the reason they didn't affect me was because, again, I'd already built up that stance of, wasn't going to get them. They were never going to be my people. That's okay. I'm not going to win over everyone. I accept that. There's going to be a candidate for them. Have a lovely day. But the people and the situations that kind of stick with you more are the people who you think you could have got. Like, so for instance, I was speaking at like a community forum through the campaign, and someone came up to me afterwards and they said, like something along the lines of like, oh, because I shared the story about how I wanted to be a vet. It was an environmental forum, and because I really wanted to emphasize to the local residents and community that my passion is environment, and that's really important to me, and that's something that I would take really seriously if I was elected. And I think my background in that is quite clear. But someone came up to me after, they was like, Lucy, I love your passion, I really love your spirit, but like, what are you doing in the Labor Party? Like, why is that where you are? Like, you know, this is like, and they were kind of, it was very much like it was looking down to me very much belittling what I was doing. Like, oh, you'll come around eventually, you don't know yet, like so on and so forth. And the reason I give this example is because what it really did was it made me walk away, and it's something I've thought about a lot, but I think what it did was ultimately solidified my position even more. Because this is something that might sound not fantastic on the surface, but I think it's something that's really reflective of most people who get involved in politics and in political parties. I wouldn't be in politics if I didn't want to change it. And when I say change it, I have so much respect, and I believe I have the values of the Labor Party, and and the people and the community I have so much respect for, and I truly identify with this group. And I think the ministers, especially Lily D'Ambrosio in Victoria with climate, I think she's doing absolutely amazing. Tanya Plibersek federally, again, I have so much respect for, and I think they're doing great jobs within the confines. But I think the Labor Party is where I need to be part of the big decisions, and I want to be in the rooms and with the people who are pushing them to go even further. And for me, adding my voice to the people already in the party, pushing for further and pushing for more change is where I need to be, because I believe it's where it's most effective. So having someone ask me that and really making me again think my position really solidified for me that I was exactly where I needed to be.
I love that. I think it dates back to the analogy of the tap and the micro and macro, because I think when I interview you and when people might look at you as like a young candidate, they might question, why are you in the Labor Party? There's so much narrative and so much commentary surrounding the Labor Party. It's such a big party really big. In Australia. It's a huge party. Yeah. And then they'd probably flip the question and be like, why aren't you in the Greens?
Yeah.
Or something that's a bit more progressive.
Yeah.
As well. But then the way you speak about it is like you can actually make change. So if you zoom in on a micro level, let's say you join Greens, but they hardly get much of the vote and they don't get majority. And that's like based off facts as well. Like that's like the extent of my knowledge.
Yep. You've nailed it.
Yeah, the Greens don't get much of the vote because not many people are ready to transition into that as well. Yeah. But you look at the Labor Party, it's almost always like Labor or Liberal. And it's that split, it's that battle, it's that narrative, like who's going to take over the leadership or ownership as well.
Absolutely. And I think you've hit the nail on the head with that one. So I think the thing I would come back to is I wanted to be in a party of government, because when you're in a party of government, that's when you have the power to make change. And there, of course, like there can be like hung parliaments and there are all other political things that can happen. But to put it simply, like being in a party of government is where you can create change. And the other thing I would want to emphasize that I don't think people think about as much. So the way that decisions are made, for instance, the Labor Party, again, to put it simply, is that the elected members of Parliament, before they go in and they vote in the chamber. So when you're in the chamber, it's not, you're listening to the other speeches and you're doing things from different political parties, but pretty much the way you're going to vote on that bill, that's been decided before you walk in. Like you've already caucused. So caucusing is the word that term is kind of like a committee, like kind of sense, but it's a word where you all come together and you debate it and you have it out. So in the Labor Party, in this caucus room, you have it out. You say your opinion, you put forward your ideas, you do everything like that. And then once you come together, you have a vote on how we're going to vote. Essentially is my current understanding. You come together and you say, this is how we're going to vote. And whatever that is, you then walk out and you vote like that. And you've got the entire party, like whoever, like the entire, party in government voting that way. Imagine how much change you can make when you've got a unified big group, a voting bloc who can say yes or no to something. Like, that's huge. So for me, when I was talking to people as part of the election, electing, so for instance, for me in the Labor Party, if I was elected to the Labor Party, you're not only getting a vote in Parliament, you're getting a vote in the party room. And when you're in the party room, the dynamics of that room and what decisions get passed and which decisions don't get passed, depending on who's debating, is really powerful as well. So I think it's not just about what happens in Parliament, but what happens in the party room and who you're electing to be part of that as well.
Yeah, I love the scope and like the thinking as well. I think a lot of people, they jump straight onto it because they're like, I want to be like that difference, I want to be that change. And like, you know, you still are being that difference and that change. I want to play devil's advocate as well. Labor Party, huge party.
Huge party.
Lots of cogs and systems.
Huge cogs.
Yeah, that's it. Like lots of decision-making processes. Do you feel that you can actually make change within the party? Do you feel like it will ever be slow with the decision-making process at all? Like how's that all?
Great question. 2 words. I do. I do. I wouldn't be here unless I thought that this is going to work. And the reason I think it's going to work is because I know I'm not alone. So when I joined the Labor Party, I knew people in the Labor Party already who have really similar values to me, different visions, similar similar policy interests. And I knew they were already working for change and the different policy ideas. So I knew that I wasn't going to be alone. I knew I was joining a team. I knew I was joining a movement pushing for something else, not just the broader Labor Party movement, but the movement within the party as well. I think you made great points about micro and macro, but like there are so many different layers to things. But I knew that I wasn't alone, and I knew I was getting involved in something bigger than myself, and I could help as part of that. So there are so many different processes and votes that happen, but I think that's one of the wonderful things about it, because to put it again simply, like who ends up being the candidate, like if is decided by your local community. It's decided by, at least with the Labor Party, like it's decided by your local community and your local branch. Who signs up as part of your community to say, this is my party, this is my values, this is where I want to go, and you get a vote. If you change, like if enough people join, and with true good interest, we're not branch stacking here, like if enough like true interest, and they say this actually isn't the person we want, like for instance, if there was enough people that had gotten involved and they said, oh, we don't want Lucy as our candidate, we want someone else, they could have overturned that. Like there could have been someone else who was for it, but having the power and the say just in that example is so powerful.
100%. I want to end on a few questions. Geez, the listeners are not engaged. They're not sending me that many questions. I mean, shout out to, oh my gosh, where was it? Plastic Free Sophia. Shout out to her. But I had a couple as well, which I think we've covered a little bit throughout the podcast. But just sort of to reiterate, what are some easy ways to get, I guess, well versed or more knowledgeable or more politically literate? What are some easy ways to get your foot in the door?
The first thing I would say is find people who are already engaged and ask. I think that's message me. Happy to definitely I still feel like a very small fish in a big pond, but there are so many people who have put in the hard yards to learn and understand, and they're more than happy to talk. So please reach out, if not me, someone else that you know, like go to your political savvy friend
literally.
And ask. If you're looking for something a bit broader, there are, you can try researching on your own, but I think whether it's direct political engagement, like a political party or becoming a candidate and things like that, or whether it's you really care about a certain issue and you want to make a difference just on that issue, find somebody else, find a group that's already doing something and talk.
Amazing. And I think I want to preface the podcast. I spoke to Lucy about how we wanted to keep this pretty neutral as we were speaking as well. So I don't want anyone to think that it's skewed or biased towards anything. I think we're just trying to get a gauge as to what it's like being a young politician. So just for the listeners there. I was asked if you had any sort of top websites or blogs that sort of discuss politics in a digestible way. I think we're in a digital media age where that's sort of what we consume, and a quick read is how we want to sort of get into these things. So do you know of any relatable or what do you call it? reputable sources?
Yeah. I think the first one that I would recommend, and I know so many young people, whether you feel like you're politically engaged or not, the Daily Oz. The Daily Oz is fantastic. I think the way that they're able to put really big faces
into like a carousel.
Into a carousel is always amazes me to every extent. But so the Daily Oz is definitely where I would recommend going. Being really purposeful in the way that you handle your social media and following people that are already engaged and are already talking about it. So a bit of a cheeky plug, follow me. But follow other people as well and it doesn't have to be follow party from whatever party you're, independent or wherever you are, follow people who are already engaged and learn from them.
100%. I think there's such a discussion surrounding social media and how you can alter your algorithm to benefit you. I know TikTok I spoke sort of really poorly on back in the day because, you know, like things like softcore porn and really unproductive content can be spat out and shuffled over to your algorithm. But when you start to engage with things that you're interested in, it starts to spit more and more of that out. So when you fine tune and tailor and be purposeful with your social media, then you can start to understand it a little bit more. Of course, sometimes you're looking for that neutral stance as well. So reading news outlets, the Daily Oz is relatively neutral, I would say.
I would say Daily Oz is relatively neutral. And I would also, one of my tips is if you have the time, looking at multiple sources. Like, for instance, I look at like The Age, the ABC, SBS, Al Jazeera, Herald Sun, like having a really diverse array of outlooks and just, even if you don't necessarily agree with it, but just even interestingly to see what people have to say.
100%.
I think is important.
Diversity, again. It's taking it off, literally. You need those different sources as well because you can't just rely on one source as well. Last question was, actually, we have a couple. I want to get into your future as well, but I wanted to ask sort of if you had a message for how important it is for young people to get into politics, or not to get into politics, but be politically literate.
I think it's so important. These are the people that have the ability. Actually, no, let me read it. I think Penny Wong has like a really fantastic quote, and I'm going to butcher it, unfortunately, but it's something along the lines of like.
We can look it up.
I think we got to look it up. Like it's such a good quote.
The quote is, you can choose not to be interested in politics, but you can't choose to be unaffected by it.
Exactly. You can, oh my God, I'm trying to quote it again. You can choose not to be interested in politics, but you can't choose to not be affected by it.
And I think it goes back to the idea of, like we know the world is depreciating.
Yeah.
But you can't sit and complain about it if you're not going to go do something about it.
Exactly. And I think it's also a luxury to not do something about it. If we're able to sit back and think that politics doesn't affect us, that's a luxury, that's a privilege, because politics does affect people every single day. These are the people who have a say over your life, your career, your jobs, like not necessarily directly, but how you, for instance, if you went to a public school, the school you went to, hospitals, roads, infrastructure, broader negotiations around peace, like these people have a stake at your life, and if you aren't paying attention, the wrong things, like destructive consequences may happen. So it's really important that you've got your ear to the ground and you having your say.
Beautiful. What's next for you, Lucy?
The first thing is graduating from university.
Did you finish this year?
No, I graduate halfway through next year.
Of course.
Halfway through next year. So I want to finish my degrees. However, I do have an exciting project, I think, coming up, so I'm looking to start an organisation. I'm thinking think tank consultancy is essentially the idea. So when I'm trying to think about how to best explain this, we've had this amazing conversation, I like to think, about getting engaged and getting involved. And I feel like there are so many people who do care. They do care. They do want the world to be better. They want to make a difference, but they don't know how. And the other thing that I think is important to think about is, or I want to be able to use the skills that I've learned over, as we've just realised, like over 10 years now, and I want to be able to help people do that. So I want to be able to consult and help people. So if you've got an idea or you've got a project that you'd like to get off the ground, please contact me. I want to help. I want to listen. And the second thing that I think is really interesting is I was part of a festival recently where I was speaking, and I got more engaged again in the advocacy side of things and about change making. And I realised that's definitely something I want to get more involved in. I think I've kind of moved towards politics really directly, and I'm very happy there and I want to stay there. But I think I forgot how much I love public speaking. And I think I forgot how much I love facilitating and teaching and being part of that. So I realised I want to get more involved in that way as well. And when I realised I wanted to get back involved in advocacy, something that I often come across is I realise I care about everything. Like I thought to myself, okay, is there one specific thing or one policy thing, or what do I want to do? What's one thing? And I realised that despite the fact I feel as if I know a fair deal about so many of the issues I care about, there isn't one thing anymore. And I realised I wanted to learn about these issues and I wanted to learn about ideas. The other thing that I've learned in my degree is that when you put something on a minister's desk, if you've got a policy idea, if you're in the public service and you're in and you've got something you want to get through, you've got one A4 page. You've got one A4 page to convince the minister that it's worth looking into. This is my current understanding. You've got one A4 page to convince the minister that your idea is worth spending time on. And that's it. So, all right. And that gets so very much money. But so I want to look at the idea of having a page and then putting, and also I think it's really interesting because we've got only a page to convince a minister, but we're also looking at how much attention we have as a society, as well with our social media, and with our phones. So I think what I want to do is I want to create a website. This is more just a sounding board now. Let me know if you like this idea and whether I should do it or not, actually. But I want to create a website where I talk to people who have ideas, and I want to be able to just put it into a page.
Beautiful.
And that way we can come to a really digestible source of information about how we can actually make a difference, how we can have a say, and then have that think tank component and then the consultancy component if you want help on how to actually make it happen. What
is the name of?
Face Forward.
Face Forward. Look out for it. I think that's such a great initiative, and a great program. Yeah, I think that will be awesome. And we've got such a brilliant array of young minds and people who are up and coming and maybe not experienced enough, but everyone's experienced shit. So
yeah, they absolutely have.
Say it, speak it,
share
it, do it. I love it. Lucy, it's been an amazing conversation discussing sort of your upbringing and sort of the tendencies that you displayed when you were a kid and then bringing them through to where you are now, which is incredible. And I admire your journey, and I've loved
yours
sort of
too.
Oh, thank you. I've admired sort of chatting about addressing the macro problem instead, and taking the chance to zoom out and see what is actually the issue that I'm trying to face here. What an incredible analogy with the water tap and the mop. That's definitely going to be one of the clips on the podcast. I love the idea of diversity and needing to be a bit more literate and electing those people into Parliament that are going to be a bit more diverse and are going to care about the types of people that are affected by any policies or rules changes and everything. And the idea that you're so young yet involved in politics, and how you are most likely paving the way for aspiring young people who are looking up to you now. And I know you're smiling and thinking, oh no, that could definitely not be me, but it's so true. There will be kids.
I'm honoured.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, it'd be incredible. What an incredible feeling, and a worthwhile experience. I know you don't do it for the attention, but it's incredible to reflect back on your journey.
Oh, it's amazing. I had someone, I was a pre-poll the 2 weeks, so early voting, I had someone come up to me when I was standing there, and they were like, are you Lucy? And I was like, yeah, I'm Lucy. And they were like, oh my, they were in a school uniform, and she said, thank you so much. I'm now thinking about politics. I've gone back and everyone at my school is so excited about you running. like, can I give you a hug? And I like melted. I was like, oh my God, yes, thank you so much.
I feel like I would cry if something like that happened to me.
It's something that when the going gets tough, like I look back and I think like I'm so glad I did this. But when I chose to run, like to finish on this, like I wanted to make sure, I knew the chances of me running. I was 20 years old, moving back into a seat that was like considered a Liberal stronghold. I wanted to make sure that my idea of success wasn't just winning the election. I wanted to make sure my idea of success about me moving back was broader than that. And one of the big things for me that counted as success was providing an example of a young woman running and trying to normalise the idea of a young candidate, and having that young girl come up to me in her school uniform telling me that she was now thinking about politics. Like,
absolutely,
it made it all worth it.
Yeah, incredible. And yeah, the idea of navigating how to actually be a difference and actually exhibit change and enact on it. I can't thank you enough for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram. I also have LinkedIn as well, and Facebook, but I think Instagram's the big one for me.
100%. Be sure to follow at Life with Lam podcast on Instagram. We're making lots of reels and content, so stay a part of it. And we'll catch you in the next episode.
Excellent.